morning. My name is Stephen LEHAT, and my firm's name is Regulatory World. You have to start on ground zero. And ground zero means that you're going to take something, which might just be an idea, and you're going to turn that into a fully fleshed business. And that means you're going to have to consider various parts of the business in a very granular fashion. You're going to, usually the way that the exercise that forces you to do that is to come up with a business plan, which is a topic in and of itself. In a business plan, you're going to address things such as marketing, such as finance, such as management, such as what kind of company you're going to have. Is it going to be a corporation or a sole proprietorship or a partnership? And of course, what is the company really going to be about? What is it going to produce? Is that which you produce something that could be protected? If it is, that's called intellectual property, and that's a subject in and of itself that you could build all the other things around. So remember, your starting point is the business plan. Time and size may play into the need for a company to be a corporation versus a sole proprietorship. Let's say you're starting at the very beginning, and it's just you, or in the state of California, just you and your spouse. Well, you could have a sole proprietorship, which means the company is you. But you don't want the company to be you, meaning just Stephen LEHAT Company. You may, but you might want to have a catchy name, or as the case might be. And for that, state of California, for a nominal fee, you could have a DBA, doing business as. And you just go down and you record your DBA, as I said, for a nominal fee, and you have a company. And then you could get a tax number for this company. You could open a bank account. You could get real checks, and you're ready to begin. Now, why would you do that? If the company has more capital or is risk adverse, they might want to start by being a limited liability company, or they might want to start by being a corporation. Those create a separate legal entity. And again, each one of those choices has different tax ramifications and liability ramifications, and also has a certain culture that separates the two. Corporations being much more structured, LLCs being much more flexible. Where does partnership come in? Well, let's say you and your buddy decide that you want to start a business together, but you don't want to go through the process of forming a limited liability company or corporation. You just want it to be the two of you, and since it's more than a sole proprietorship, you form a partnership. That's a company too. But that company does not create a separate legal liability shield for you as an LLC or a corporation would, but it does create, again, the opportunity for individuals to work together within a company context and to have an agreement as to how that company will do business. There are also other flavors of partnerships. There are limited partnerships, which have particular individuals which do have protection as if they're a corporation or limited liability company, and then there are general partners in those limited partnerships, which indeed are just partners, and they do not have that protective separate existence. When you start to get into these subjects, you need to take a much deeper dive into why you would choose one over the other. When you get into the world of limited partnerships, Many times you're talking about things such as hedge funds and venture funds and things of that nature. Partnerships are very common in many aspects, many types of businesses, from consultancies to law firms to CPAs. There's no monopoly on where partnerships come in, nor is there for LLCs or corporations. But one thing's for sure, as your company grows, you may become more risk adverse because you have more money on the line. You have more money to lose, and therefore you may want to protect it. And as you're successful, you have also more personal assets which are growing, and those personal assets are being separated from the company assets, but they will not be legally separated unless you take the steps, such as forming a corporation. And that is why the question of what the company is going to be at any given time and any given size becomes more and more important as you become more and more successful. Closer to an LLC in terms of the tax treatment. It would be called a pass-through type of a tax treatment versus a C corporation, which has particular advantages when you deal with the world of investors, because the C corporation is truly, the corporation is taxed as a corporation. So if there's money in the corporation at the end of the fiscal year, it pays a special corporate rate. And if it makes no money, it still has to pay something to the state of California. So the very interesting thing with the corporations is, as an officer in the corporation, you're paid a salary. You pay taxes on that salary, and that's dependent upon how much money you're making. And with regards to the federal government, with regards to the state government, but with regards to the corporation itself, monies that remain in the corporation are going to be taxed at the corporate rate. A C corporation really has an existence which is the most structured and the most separate from all of the entities to choose from, and is preferred by many, many investors for that reason.
And is that because ultimately they're hoping to go public?
Not necessarily. There are a couple of flavors of exit strategies, and one of the most sought after is acquisition. And the level of accounting, financial reporting, the recording of the meetings that take place with the boards of directors, the shareholders, and anything else which relates to the company is going to be much more transparent. It's going to be much more put down and recorded in the case of a C corporation. So if you're an investor, you want to be in a position where you understand as much as possible as is going on in the entity under question, and the C corporation would have the largest reporting requirements. If you are fortunate enough to have intellectual property, your whole company, as I said before, would be built around it. What is it? Well, one can sort of say, through reverse engineering, as it were, that intellectual property is anything that could be protected in your company. And the vehicles for protection are trademarks, copyrights, patents, and trade secrets. And so if something is in the public domain, everybody knows about it, then that's by definition available to everyone, and that's not going to be protectable as intellectual property because it's available to all and no one owns it. But let's say you make movies. Well, if you make movies, there are all sorts of parts of your intellectual property, ranging from the performance to the script to any aspect of graphics that goes into that process that can be protected with copyrights. If you make a utilitarian invention, you come up with the latest vehicle or battery that fits into a car that allows that car to go across the nation, unlike one that runs out of electricity after 10 miles. All of a sudden, you've come up with something which is the best thing since sliced bread. And you go through the patent process, which is quite complex, and you need to have certified patent attorneys, those who have passed the patent bar, to be able to navigate those waters. There are a few lay people that do it, but for the most part, that is not the norm. Folks that have a patent on their utilitarian inventions, again, have something which they have protected and can build a company around, and it draws investors to have something of that sort. Trademark is a brand. What's a brand? Well, Chevrolet cars, Tesla automobiles. Think of a brand as an adjective. But in today's day and age, everybody talks about branding. Everybody talks about celebrity. Well, the LeBron James brand, the Jessica Alba brand, you name it. But all of these adjectives are of something. So you'll have people that are making clothes. You'll have people that are making beauty products. You'll have people that are making sneakers, like Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan, and it goes on and on. There's always somebody making something and lending their name to that, and or creating a name for that, such as Apple Computers or whatever the case might be. So a brand is important because it identifies the source. So if you build your brand up through advertising and marketing, and people come to you because they expect a certain level of excellence whenever they hear that magical word, then you don't want other folks using your brand, because then they will go to them believing it's you. And that's why brands need to be protected, and they are protected with trademarks. Well, trade secrets, think of the formula for making Coca-Cola. Nobody knows it. It's hidden away. Actually, somebody knows it, but not too many. And it's hidden away, and it's not in a patent, and it's not in a copyright or a trademark. It is in somebody's safe, and it is controlled tightly by contract, and nobody really knows what it is. It is a trade secret. And there are many things which are trade secrets that are developed by companies, and why they choose to use this vehicle. One of the most significant things is patents run out. And patents are the shortest of all the vehicles of intellectual property protection. So what that means is, if you have a choice between a patent and a trade secret, you might well just say, I'm going to do a trade secret. And same thing with regards to copyright, or what's called a design patent. A design patent is very similar to a copyright. Let's say you have a sculpture of something, and it's embossed on a case, and you have a choice of getting that which is embossed protected by a copyright or by a design patent. Design patent is going to be much shorter, decades shorter than a copyright. So there are reasons, plus the cost of getting a patent or the cost of getting a design patent is immeasurably more expensive than getting a copyright. So there's a weighing that's going on. What's the best bang for your buck in terms of being able to get protection that is powerful yet affordable? And sometimes you don't have a choice. Utilitarian things almost inevitably are going to end up in the world of patents, but sometimes they could be trade secrets, and then you control your own destiny, because trade secrets do not have an end point as long as you keep them secret. You use a license when either you want to piggyback on somebody that you think can be more successful with your invention or work of art or whatever it happens to be than you are, and they don't have a right to do anything with it, but you want them to commercialize it. So you will license it to them, and they will do the sales and marketing, and then ultimately the money will be divvied up in accordance with the terms of the license. I've had clients that were extremely successful and ultimately decided after decades in business that they'd be better off licensing their intellectual property and have it made by third parties and marketed by third parties, and then to share the money in that way. Why? Because in order to be hands-on with the production of whatever you're dealing in, you need the capital for that production. And you need all the necessary aspects of management in dealing with all the employees and the entire panoply of business aspects to develop good and or service, market it, sell it, and make sure that it's improved over time, etc. And licensing creates sometimes a second life, sometimes it creates the only life. You've come up with that germ of an idea. One of the most interesting things is probably at least 80% of things that are patented never get commercialized. So therefore, the ability to have an appropriate relationship when you may not be able to take the product the full distance is a very smart thing. It also could work in reverse. You could be a sensational marketing and sales company, and you end up with somebody who has come up with something astounding, but they have no clue how to commercialize it. In that case, you license it from them, you go the full distance. Now, sometimes it's more complicated than that, because let's say they've come up with the germ of the idea, but they're not masters of production, marketing, sales, or anything. So you might be the marketing and sales company, but it might fall on your shoulders to ultimately find contract manufacturing and or the appropriate investors that are going to support internal manufacturing for this. And that might end up being more like a joint venture between all of the parties. Your imagination could run wild as to the various combinations that a successful business will use to achieve that success. And that may well, as I said, change over time. So let's again start at the beginning. We have a situation for somebody at the very beginning. What is that person going to do? Usually, that person is going to use their own money. Many people will max out their credit cards. Many people will take a second mortgage. It sounds terrible, but people are very passionate about their businesses, and they go to the limit. And then they will go to their friends and family. And I like to sort of describe the friends and family as folks that love you more than they love their money, because they have a very good chance with a new business of having to love you more than their money, because their money may be gone very quickly. So friends and family really are very close friends and family after you've used up pretty much your own resources. That usually will take you to a certain level, and every business will be different. But then the question will be, let's say I've reached that level, then what? I have to go into that cold, cruel world of folks that really want everything for nothing and want a return that I can't imagine I could truly deliver to them, but I have to say I will, or else they won't look at me. So what do you do? There are baby steps and bigger steps, and it really depends on milestones that you're achieving. So for some folks, there's abilities to get grants because they're doing something scientific, so there are different institutions that may give them grants. So that's a special category, and that requires expertise from people who know how to write grant applications. So that's a limited group of companies may be able to get that money after they graduate out of these other areas. And again, by meeting milestones, they create the opportunity to get more grant money. But a point is ultimately reached where that money goes out because grants are not intended to support the next IBM and the next Xerox or the next Apple or Google in today's day and age. So ultimately, the companies will start to think about what can I do to get private money. And the starting point for that is a group called angels. And angels are individual investors, which usually sort of are organized by different angel groups specifically for companies to present to those angel investors. And those investors invest as individuals, and the amount of money they put into projects is perhaps tens of thousands of dollars, occasionally hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if they'll pool their money, maybe $1 million. In the scope of business, it's a starter. It's the next step after you've graduated from those steps before. Ultimately, you're going to want to be in a situation where you could move on to venture funds, and because they deal in larger amounts of money. But every business has certain needs which will change over time, and we get back to the original thing of your business plan that sort of forces you to take a time look at the company. What am I going to need at this point in time? What am I going to need to do in this point of time as I march step by step to the development of the business? And the business on day one, even if it's making profit after a short period of time, is not the business a year later. The more successful the business is, the more radical the business changes. And so I once spoke to an entrepreneur, one of those folks that calls themselves a serial entrepreneur, and they said, I could tell a company is worthwhile if the management tells me that they expect to be fired, because in essence, they appreciate that a point will be reached where they will be in over their head, that they have no idea. When the company goes to $1 million, and then to 20 million, and then to who knows how many million, they're like fish out of water. And if they are able to recognize that, investors appreciate that they care more about the success of the company than they care about their own imprint on the company. So while they have passion, they have their core ideas, they have a realization that ultimately the company is going to evolve. And that is a very helpful way of looking at an entity, which is a little bit difficult to do at that when you're starting out, let's say, in your bedroom or your garage, and with these lofty thoughts, and you're, as I said, maxing out your cards and everything else. But the fact is that success means that you need to think in that things are ultimately larger than you. Do they have the right management for that point in for the company at that point in its cycle? Something which, well, one needs to appreciate, but in order to build the company, of course, you need to be very, very particular and specific. You don't start out by thinking about the roof on the 100th floor when you're putting that first brick in the basement. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk today at the Beverly Bar Association. It's my pleasure.